This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Mary Beth Schrudder, spiritual life coach. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's great to have new people on the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast all the time. We appreciate that you're here. We do have your link tree up /day one life coaching. That will be fully clickable. If anybody wants to check that, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch at the moment. So in the podcast description, that link will be fully clickable to let everybody know. Also, let everybody know that we are a featured podcast on the Newsly Network. Yeah, and listen on Newsly icon. If you use the coupon code GHOST, you can check that out for 30 days without having to pay anything. So that's a way to check it out on a different network if you want to hear it in your headphones or something. It's an audio only version of the podcast. Other than that, I want to start with a couple questions I ask of any guest. What motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Gosh, well, the reason I do what I do is I only teach things that I've been through personally myself. So I'm in as a spiritual life coach, what I focus on most is helping people with toxic relationships, addictions. And that's mainly like I got myself through both of those things. I had addictions to even toxic relationships. That can be an addiction for people.
Mm-hmm.
And alcohol was my big thing. I had a 30-year unhealthy relationship with alcohol. I'm 50 now. I quit drinking alcohol when I was 45. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know I was addicted until I started to add on. I was already a life coach. I was running two businesses actually at the time. And I went to add on an addiction recovery niche to I'm going to help other people. Right. And when I'm learning about it, I'm like, uh-oh, this sounds a little bit like me with my relationship with alcohol, you know? So, once I learned all of that and like the real definition of addiction, I think a lot of us are clueless about that. I knew that I need to quit. I no longer had peace with drinking alcohol the more I learned about it. And I wanted to help others with that, as well as other addictions and unhealthy relationships. I also help people just in general as a life coach with happiness. I help people through divorce, marriage, um, basically fitness too. They're being their
Mm-hmm.
optimal fitness. All the things, anything as a life coach, anything to do with life. But my stuff has a little bit of a spiritual twist to it. So
So it's like because you experienced things, you wanted to be able to kind of add, value add of being able to teach what you've gone through to other people. And
yeah,
you take your lessons learned and apply them and like help uplift other folks.
absolutely. Like I almost feel like it's mandatory. Like when you pull yourself out of the darkness, it's like my obligation now to help other people, like to do the same. Cause it's, I see like so many people with unhealthy relationships and their, personal life with people and also with alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people struggling with career. And a lot of this stuff has to do with self worth,
Yeah.
like
So
limiting beliefs, things like that. And I hired a life coach a long time ago, and that really I was like, wow, I knew instantly this is what I want to do because it was amazing and life changing, and I knew that I wanted to be that person to uplift others.
it's that imposter syndrome. I would work with a lot of musicians and artists and creators, and a lot of times people will see them on stage and they seem like they're very confident,
Mm,
because you have it like your stage self.
yes,
So if you're a musician or a creative person, you got that stage self. Everybody said, "Wow, that person's like, oh, they're on it." Right? Then they get off the stage, and like all the insecurities. Like as a producer, and an engineer, like you see the insecurities when you're
that's
working
so common. Yeah,
with
that's
the
so
artist.
common.
Yeah, you see all the things. It's like wow, and that's kind of like the looking glass self. I was always into Victorian poetry. Is like if you're going to be a writer, you always kind of start with that, like looking in the mirror and then
Hmm.
finding those things that are inside of you that you feel other people will be able to feel this feeling. If I can put it into words, if I can put it into music, other people will identify with that. And it's kind of hard because you have to be vulnerable.
Yes.
And I think the vulnerability, like artists, we're willing to be vulnerable, but there's a cost to it. Sometimes we run into addictive things or all kinds of bad habits because we put ourselves out there. And then
Hmm.
it hurts, and then you have bad habits to kind of resolve the hurt. But, that's that kind of process, but maybe you can talk more about, like, how you got through your addiction and learn to kinda,
Yeah.
value, you know, the idea of, like, taking it on because you had your looking glass self moment when you said, "Oh wow, I actually have some issues with alcohol."
Yeah, and before that was, like, everything else, like, all the like, you're right, and that was beautifully said. Everything you just said is spot on, and, um, back when I decided to become a life coach, yeah, I just definitely was definitely had it's called a dark night of the soul, I believe, where you
Mhm.
really look at yourself and you do this thing called shadow work, and what you do is you have to really um, recognize all of these rejected parts of yourself, right? And until we do, and there really is no spiritual awakening without this healing journey first. We have to have this healing journey. And it's tough to look at yourself. It's tough to be vulnerable because I can tell you that I was the same way with imposter syndrome for a while. Even when I started to be a life coach and I did have a lot of confidence, for a while I was like, well, who's going to listen to me? Like, who am I? Because,
Yeah,
but you know what? What's really the truth? All of my mistakes, all of the things that I went through in life, that's what qualifies me. That's what qualifies you is you learned from these mistakes and therefore they're not mistakes in my opinion. They're lessons.
yeah.
And
Well, yeah. It's
yeah,
definitely
so
like it's all the things that they like that we call happy accidents in music. Like it's all those
yeah.
things that you're like, "Yo, I hit the wrong note. I hit the wrong chord. I'm in the wrong key." A lot of times, like, well, look at the moment you're in,
Mhm.
and actually that so-called mistake actually opened up a whole new world. You actually end up having a better song than what you originally thought you were gonna have. But if you don't
Absolutely.
believe in yourself, you can keep on hitting go back to the beginning, you do 1,000 takes, you do 100 takes, and really the 3rd or 4th take that was really good. And
Yep.
you as you learn as you get more, in control of yourself in terms of, like, believing in yourself and not having that imposter syndrome, you start to realize, yeah, the earlier takes seem to be better than the
Mhm.
ones that I'm obsessing on.
Right. And, like, in retrospect, I think, like, all the stuff I went through, like, during, divorce and being a single mom and having struggles with alcohol and all the dark times and the toxic relationships, it's hard to see while you're in it. But in retrospect, I can look back and be like, "Oh my gosh, everything unfolded so beautifully." You just can't tell when you're in it. Like, I needed to experience all of those things. Everything that happened, I wouldn't change a thing, Like, I really
Yeah.
can look back and say there is nothing I would change because it brought me to where I am today. And so I would say anyone listening, like, I don't care what you're going through. If I could quit drinking alcohol, I drank almost every day for 30 years. That's a lot, right? And what's
Mm.
crazy about alcohol, I know that wasn't going to be our main topic, but just it does kind of go into the relationship thing a little bit because a lot of why I stayed in toxic relationships is because of the clouded judgment that alcohol gives you.
Yeah. That was a
So
way to kinda cope through it, maybe it was a coping mechanism because you
it
were in it.
it's definitely self-medicating and coping for sure. So yeah, it does keep you involved in those. And then a lot of it's just because people get into and one of the reasons I got into alcohol in the first place was we have these childhood patterns, right? We've got these traumas and things that happened and we tend to repeat these patterns and we
Mhm.
want to we want to numb out. We want to not, I had a lot of social anxiety when I was younger. As a child, some of the traumas like were abandonment. I had some abandonment wounds, because of my parents' divorce when I was 5 and that it made me feel very insecure in life. And my mom was like working full time, so like we were like sent to a neighbor's house who really didn't give a crap about us, to be honest with you. So there
Wow.
was a lot of neglect. I remember being hungry all the time. My mom didn't know when I was 5. My
Yeah.
brother
Didn't know how
3.
to vocalize what was going on,
I
yeah.
didn't even know it was wrong. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I didn't know, and so and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, so my dad can leave, that means my mom can leave too," and I just really I was alone a lot, and my brother was only 3, like I said, and he ended up later we all deal with, like, traumatic events differently, and a divorce in your family, breakup of a marriage is a trauma.
It's
People
a
don't
trauma.
people
Yeah,
don't realize that. Yeah.
it's a psychic trauma. I mean, it really early development, I was in sociology, and there's a lot of studies on family, the sociology of family. One of the
Yeah.
courses I took when I was in college, and it talked about, the social, structure of society and the family structure and how important it is for those family relationships. And if they get broken, then you see a lot of we did a lot of studies
Mhm.
on the structure of family in relation to like the microcosm and the macrocosm. Microcosm is the family itself, and then in relation to the overall society. And then you start looking at all kinds of issues like addiction, criminality, all kinds of issues, and you can run through it. Poverty, it
Mhm.
just like there was all these patterns that we could find, and we go look at the family structure and it's like, oh, we can find root causes.
It's really true, and then we also now we know there's generational trauma where it's actually in our DNA, where it wasn't even during our lifetime, but in our DNA, we actually can feel the trauma and we don't even understand consciously that we're
Yeah,
actually
handed
feeling
down.
trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so my dad, well, I didn't know this until I was an adult, but my dad was actually very abused by his father, who died of cirrhosis of the liver from alcohol when my mom was pregnant with me. So I never even met my grandpa, right? But he was very abusive, apparently, to my dad, the whole family, my grandma.
Mhm.
And, so he was pretty much emotionally absent, but that's the best he could do, right? Like, if you think about, like, he wasn't abusive, he wasn't kicking our ass or anything like that. Like what happened to him, it was just he didn't have a
Yeah,
good role model.
it's kind of
So that's
handed
a
down like a toxic masculinity. A lot of
yes.
times is handed down within family structures and also within general society because if it has this idea that that's okay, that that's
Mhm.
actually expected,
Yeah.
that's the expected behavior of the man to have this kind of very bad. It's not a good feel, but you might not know it's not good, right?
Right.
Like if your
Right.
grandpa did it and your great grandpa did it, and everybody in your family line was acting that way,
It's just how it is, right?
then
It's
that's
just
what
how
you're
it is.
taught. And if all
Yeah.
the other men say, yeah, that's right. So, you know, that's where your headspace is because that's what all your inputs are telling you it's okay.
And luckily, he wasn't abusive in that way, but he was very emotionally absent. I think that's the best he could do. Like, he was never taught how to do that. So that also that was a pattern created in me for the toxic relationships where I'm now, like, subconsciously, this is not on a conscious level, but we look for things that are familiar, right? So then I'm starting,
Mhm.
like, the people that I'm attracted to, the men that I'm attracted to in life are never emotionally available, right?
Yeah, law
Like,
of
because
attraction.
that's what I'm used to.
You get drawn. Yeah, the law of attraction is you get drawn, whether it's positive or negative. Some people say, well, they think of the law of attraction, oh, it's always going to be positive. No, it goes either way on the
It
spectrum.
works both ways, and I'm glad you brought that up because I actually teach law of attraction too. I'm very much into that, for many, 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 many years. And something that I didn't know, because so I had this anxious attachment style, right? From growing up the way I did. So I would when you have an anxious attachment style, it's very easy for to be on the radar of narcissists, like,
Mm,
because they see you coming from a mile away, because they know, oh, she's anxious and I can take advantage of that, because you're very easily manipulated when you have an anxious attachment style. There's anxious, avoidant, and secure. So I was definitely more on the anxious side because of that abandonment wound that I had, from the divorce situation. And I just had generalized anxiety. I had separation anxiety. I always thought every time my mom left the house, something was going to happen. She wasn't going to come home. So I was just like, just
mm.
constantly, it was pretty bad. Like, and back in the 70s,
Yeah,
there wasn't, like, our parents weren't like, oh, let's go to therapy. It wasn't
yeah.
like that.
It was
So
only on Newhart, and that
they're
wasn't
like
until
they're
the
like,
80s.
deal with it, like,
Yeah.
just calm down, and what's wrong with you, and that kind of thing. Like, it wasn't really recognized. But with the law of attraction, so I kept attracting this over and over. And this is a part of law of attraction that I couldn't understand. And it was so hard for me to, put two and two together. Like, this doesn't fit. Because if we attract what we are, why do I keep attracting narcissists? Because I'm not a narcissist. I'm not I was like attracting narcissists, liars, cheaters, and I knew that I'm none of the above. So why am I attracting this? Well, what I found out later on an expansion of law of attraction courses, was that we don't only attract what we are, we also attract things that we judge, or anything that we have an energetic spark with. So I was definitely outside of the toxic relationships. I still was very judgmental of liars and cheaters and narcissists. I was very judgmental. So I still had this energetic spark that I'm putting out there. And if you want to attract something, put an energetic spark out there.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
was still like a little magnet,
yeah.
for this,
We're on the
exactly what
same
I didn't
frequency.
want.
Yeah, it's like this idea of frequency, like people that could be on a frequency, like if you're not
Hmm.
fully in tune with yourself, you're like this idea of music is like dissonance, right?
Yes.
So you're gonna bring this dissonant thing to you, which is like
Yep.
the narcissist, right? And so
Exactly what you don't want.
yeah, you bring the thing that you don't want because like you haven't come to terms with it. You haven't done the full like looking glass self analysis of like, okay, why am I triggered by this? Why do I do that?
Hmm.
Why do I hang around these people? Why do I do if I don't feel good? Like if you don't start doing that assessment, right? And it depends on like what makes you get to that point, the crucible moment that makes you like, oh, I need to look at this. Like,
Yeah.
but sometimes there's some kind of crucible moment in your life where you say, well, you know what? This isn't working anymore. I better start looking at it. I better start maybe asking questions of myself and then ask for help from other people.
Well, for me, it was judgment, and I needed to have a judgment detox and really get into forgiveness and having compassion for these people. Even though I was the victim, I had to get out of that victim role, right? Because two people are always participating in these toxic relationships. I got into them, right? And I stayed in them. So I had to
Mhm.
first take responsibility and accountability for what was my part in this relationship, right? So a lot of us don't want to do that. We just want to stay in the victim role because it's much easier than doing this work on ourselves. So then, forgiving myself, forgiving the other person, and even getting to the point of having compassion. Like, you know what? These people who manipulated me, they were born a clean slate. They were babies. Stuff happened to them in life to make them feel like they need to manipulate and lie and cheat and steal to get love. So
Yeah, everybody has to feel
that's their
safe. Yeah,
cycle, right?
like everybody has like you could be in a codependent relationship. People are looking at it like, how could it be in it? But you could feel safe in that moment, in that
Hmm.
period, you're in that situation because like it's scarier.
To
There's
leave.
more fear attached to break out of it because you're in a pattern. Like if somebody in a
Exactly.
job, like a toxic workplace, but it's paying the bills, and they're more scared about like, well, how am I going to pay the mortgage than to getting that away from the toxic boss.
Yeah,
You know,
there's something I posted yesterday that the statistics were saying that 90% of marriages are codependent and like trauma bonds, even because
yeah,
it's really hard to break out of them, and not all of them are based on love anymore. And a lot of that, is when we're first with somebody, we're in this limerence phase, right? And it's infatuation, and a lot of people they think that's gonna last forever, right? But, it's that passion doesn't last forever, and
yeah,
it doesn't mean you don't love the person. It's not supposed to last forever. It moves on to intimacy, and intimacy is, better. It really is better than that, because a lot of times that limerence, we've just created a story in our head about this person. We put them on a pedestal,
yeah. It's
and
idealized vision. It's like an
yeah,
idealized vision. It's like okay, the first like the honeymoon's over now. Like like the date when you first date somebody, it's all this passion.
passion.
And then it starts to drop off as you start to like, okay, I start to let my hair down. I start to
Mhm.
like, oh, I didn't shave. I didn't take the shower. So now like, oh, now, so now you start to say, well, then now you're more real. So the more real you get, and then once you have kids, even more real, right?
Yeah,
Because
the
you
fantasy's
have to,
over.
yeah, because now you don't get sleep. You're taking care of diapers. You're doing this. It's like the kids doing number
Welcome to the
four. It's like
real
all
world.
this stuff. It's like real world stuff. Like
Mhm.
now, like it's not as sexy to like go out on Wednesday and take the garbage out. Yeah,
But I love that these days. These days, like I love the whole idea. Like we should feel like we're with our best friend. And one red flag that you're in a toxic relationship is you feel more like you're with your enemy.
mm,
And there's all these ups and downs, and people get that's another addiction. It definitely happened to me. You can get addicted because it's a dopamine hit. Even when you're arguing, you get your brain is triggered the same way like drugs. Like
oh,
yeah, you really it has that same chemical effect on your brain. And
to the
so, like,
conflict. You're getting drawn to the conflict.
you can get
Actually,
addicted to drama. You can get
yeah,
addicted to
drama,
drama.
the
It's so
drama
crazy.
situation. Yeah, that's a hard thing to get because a lot of people, sometimes what happens with artists is like you get drawn to the things like a lot of times we write things based on bad things that happen, right?
Mm,
So if all your
mhm,
hits are based on like, example, like when I've seen Fire, I've seen Rain, James
mhm.
Taylor, right? He was going through addiction. He was like
Yes.
on heroin. Like a lot of his fans, like they loved his music when he wrote from that pain.
Mhm.
When he got married and he actually had a happy spell, he did an album, like a double album, and it didn't have any songs like When I Seen Fire Over Rain. It was all kind of happy because he was happy, but nobody liked it. Nobody liked
Where's
to hear
where's
what he
Tragic
had
the
to say.
Pain?
Yeah, because people like didn't the artist dilemma is like if they only like it when I'm in pain, then I have to go toward the pain to actually keep my career going, which is
Well,
very dangerous.
and look at the news, like what sells. Like there's a reason we only see all this bad news all the time. People are addicted to that and the adrenaline rush. And you know what's interesting is the hardest relationship after a toxic relationship is your first healthy one because you can feel kind of bored because you're
Mm,
used to that roller coaster ride. And suddenly you're like this healthy person, like,
not
and
exciting.
it almost feels like they don't care about you because they don't get jealous and controlling. And you're like, what? I'm like so used to that means you don't care because you're so used to the
Take 'em for
un,
granted because like
unhealthy patterns that you don't realize. No, it's not healthy for somebody to be,
no drama. It's like if there's no
yeah,
drama, then there's no like, is there
they
no
don't care.
romance if there's no drama? Because a lot of
Yeah.
times, if you read romance novels, kind of priming everybody to these like fights or these
Hmm.
or jealousy or all kinds of situations. Is like, well, is that really your best friend? Is that really your soulmate? If it's making you feel like terrible,
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
that really what you want? But if you actually are priming people, say, well, that's what love is.
Hmm.
Love is you're going to go through all this heavy drama, and
We
they're
got our
not your
soap
best friend.
operas, right?
And
So
yeah,
people
they're
love
not.
soap operas.
Yeah, they're not your best friend. They're not
Mhm.
really your soulmate. They're actually like polar
Oh,
opposite.
yeah.
It's like, is that really what you want? And people are like, well, here's my best friend and here's my husband. Best friend has nothing to do with the way my husband is.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, we wanna be with our best friend, and I can tell you, like, one way to avoid getting into these toxic relationships to begin with is to really take time in the beginning when we're in that limerence phase, like, really actually always be yourself from the very beginning, because a lot of us are like, "Oh, me too," when we just, like, want the other person to like us and we're too agreeable, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
really important we want that person to actually fall in love with who we are,
Yeah,
and
be authentic.
yeah, and it's okay to, like, it's okay if someone doesn't match with you. That's okay. Like you're not going to be everybody's type and that's perfectly fine. So you might go on a lot of dates and being yourself they're like, "Oh yeah, that's not for me." Good. It's better to know that up front. And I even made an acronym for love. So this is like what I recommend. This is what we need. Actually, I don't just recommend it. This is so needed. And before we enter a relationship with somebody, you need to make sure. So for the letter L is lifestyle. So you want to make sure that you two have the same lifestyles. Like for me, like I can't date somebody who drinks a lot, or I really don't want to date anybody who drinks at all. To be honest with you, because that lifestyle doesn't match mine anymore. Um,
Hmm.
so lifestyle is important in a lot of ways. So we know like how do you want to live? How does someone keep their house? Or they, like if you're a really tidy person and they're not, that's going to drive you crazy. There is that might be something you could work through, but there's a lot of lifestyle issues. Like some people would want to live by the beach and someone else is like, "Oh no, I plan on living by the mountains." Well, that
Yeah.
lifestyle is not going to match. So these are
Polar
things that
opposite. Yeah.
we
Pretty
want
simple.
to talk about these right up front. We don't want to wait until we're already in the relationship to talk about those. And so the letter O, so that's lifestyle. And the letter O is an open heart. We got to be open. So no commitment phobes. If somebody is not open to long-term relationship and that's what you want, move on. Don't waste your time. Don't waste their time. That's not a match.
You
You
don't want to
both
try to change them if that's not who they are.
and you can't fall in love with potential. Exactly. So you want to make sure you both have an open heart. And the V is for values, which might be the most important. You want your values to match, right? Like if someone goes to church and the other person is an atheist, y'all aren't going to be a good match. Sorry. Um, So values, and that could be even something like family, and one person isn't close to with their family and the other one wants to have dinner every Sunday with their family and expects their partner to be there. Well, that's something to discuss. Those values are huge. What is okay in a relationship? What are your boundaries? Those are part of values as well. And that you want to create those healthy boundaries with each other. Like, hey, is it cool if I have female friends or male friends, or whichever, like that's a part of your value system. Not
Yeah.
everybody's cool. Not everybody's cool
Yeah.
with that.
Some people aren't cool with that at all.
No. And then the last letter, E, is for expectations. So, like, what are your expectations? Do you want kids? Does the other person want kids? Like, what do you expect? How is a relationship going to look long term? Those are things we really want to. People wait so long to discuss them, and we really need to discuss those early on
Yeah.
in our dating. And nobody's going to like this, but I am telling you, it makes all the difference in the world. Don't drink on the first 3 dates. Do
Yeah.
not drink alcohol on the first 3 dates, because you have the cloud of judgment, you miss red flags, things that are very obvious to me now. Back when I would drink on date, because I loved everybody. I was a pretty fun drinker, okay? I'm not gonna lie. And I loved everybody, so it would be hard for me to see
It's
red
gonna
flags.
it's gonna,
Yeah.
yeah, affect your judgment. And the problem is, it's like, I think the alcohol industry kind of puts it out there, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the way people socialize, it puts it out there. Everywhere you go, even if you only go to the restaurant, you're probably gonna have alcohol if you're on a date, right? Like, you go to the club, you're probably gonna have alcohol. Unless you go into the coffee shop, you probably won't. So it's like, it's like the lubricant, and everybody's being taught that it's the social lubricant, because the problem is, being yourself is hard,
Yeah.
right? And the
Especially if you have social
vulnerability,
anxiety. Yeah.
yeah, it's that vulnerability, especially if you got anxiety. The vulnerability, you're gonna go reach for things that give you less anxiety.
Mhm.
You're gonna mask, like, the things that those critical flags, you're gonna miss them,
Yep.
because also you get these idealized visions, right? So then you're scared to actually, well, of course he's gonna want kids, but you never ask him.
Mhm.
Like, of course, like, I'm gonna have my family over, but you never really pointed that out.
You
So,
just
like, there's all
create
these,
those stories in your head, right? Like,
yeah,
just
there's always
create.
a, well, yeah, if he's a good guy, he's gonna do it. It's like, well, did you ever ask? Did you
Mhm.
ever check? Like, all these assumptions made. It's like assumptions lost.
Right, and we just you're exactly right of what you said. So that's why it's like I noticed going on dates, if you don't drink, you're gonna have a lot of first dates because it's so easy. We have our discernment, right? We have that wisdom that we don't
Yeah, you're
have.
like, no, this isn't the guy.
Right, and we kinda blow things off and, "Hey, it was fun." We think back on the date and it's a little bit blurry when we had drank and we're like, "Yeah, I think it was fun," and we accept another date when, and really it's not fair to the other person either because 'cause we're wasting their time,
Yeah,
and so there's that part of it too, but it's a challenge and I understand, but it does get so much easier with practice because like I said, that's the whole reason I had so much anxiety and that's why I drank so much. So if I can do it, literally anybody can. It's just this practice. And my whole dating, everything I did was, I had relationships I could say, like, man, I was drunk for that whole relationship. That's all we did was party together. You know what I mean? And get in
yeah.
fight.
Well, that's the thing, is you can have your party pal, and then you guys are like codependency, and there's like, the only time you're really happy is when you're in that party situation, right? You're
Yeah.
going to the club, you're going to Vegas, you're doing this, and it seems like, okay, that's cool. But what happens when you don't have that? What happens when you
You
don't have,
sober up.
yeah, and you have to deal with something that's real, and then it's not
Exactly.
fun because this person is actually not the person to be with when something real happens. Because then they clam up, or they don't want to do it, or then you suddenly, oh, well, I didn't see that. It's like, well, if you're only in this zone, you don't see it.
Yeah, it's so true. You're not really getting to know that real person ever. And that's when I say like I was drunk for an entire relationship. Every time we went out, we're drinking and you just know that party side. And yeah, and something really important to pay attention to, like to stay out of toxic relationships is really watching when you're on a date, actions, not words. Don't go by what they say, go by what they do
What
and
would
how
you
they're
do? Yeah.
how they're treating people is so important. Like, we all
How
know
they
that,
treat
like
how you treat the waiting person out
yes,
there, really rude or obnoxious,
that
then
take
like,
note. Take note
Yeah,
of
you
that.
start seeing that, and it's like, "Well, is that really cool to be that mean to the waitress? To be that mean to the guy at the front door? Like, does that or the host? Or like, that's how they treat other people."
Mhm.
You start to
Yes.
see, like, patterns with the how they treat other people, like, well, that could apply to you as well, and
And how
maybe
do
it's
they
not
talk
apply.
about their exes? How do they talk about their ex? Are they all
Yeah.
crazy psychos? Well, they're all crazy psycho I mean, who's the common
Who's
denominator, right? Like, they're all
you?
crazy and I mean, maybe you drove them crazy. So like it also shows that they haven't gotten to a point of healing. Like cuz I don't talk that way about my exes anymore, because I understand the role that I played and if I don't blame my exes for everything that went wrong.
Mhm.
So that shows you that I went through and did the work and the personal development stuff that to where I'm
Yeah, because usually by the time you've developed, like, you end up forgiving people for whatever they went through, because they were going through something too, like you mentioned. Like, everybody you run into, uh, you know, even the narcissist, there's something that made them, that got them to that point,
yeah.
right? And then once you get to a point where, like, "Oh, I'm big enough to actually forgive them and move on." Right? I'm not gonna obsess about, what happened in the past. I'm gonna learn from it, but I'm not gonna keep on going back and, like, having this resentment. I think that's where a lot of problems today is, like, there's so much resentment for things, and people don't know how to, like, let go. There's this idea, like, let go, like God,
Yeah.
whatever the spiritual is. But, like, if you find some kind of spiritual balance, then you're probably not gonna be so obsessed about what happened
Yeah.
yesterday or 2 weeks ago or 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
You're
and you
gonna be
really
like,
got to look at yourself. Like, what did you do? Like, because I could tell you in my marriage, I was younger in my 20s, and I didn't appreciate as much as I could. It goes back to law of attraction too. Is what was I focused on? I only focused on the negative, so I didn't appreciate all the stuff he did do. I was just focusing on what he didn't do, and he kind of did the same thing to me. It was that codependent trauma situation. But, yeah, so the argument style is a huge thing as well. Really pay attention to how someone acts when they argue. Are they able to be a healthy communicator? Or are they just yelling and,
yeah,
they're
ramp
they're
up from 0 to
shut you
100.
down? Exactly. It doesn't escalate really quickly. They've got some triggers, like, obviously, they haven't worked some things out, and I've even noticed, some guys, like, it's almost like they're continuing an argument with an ex. Like, you could tell this has nothing to do with
Their
what we're
trigger,
talking about
yeah,
here.
the
Yeah.
word triggers them, and then they go right back to what some situations like deja vu that they
Yeah,
had
it's
with
not
their
even
ex.
about you, and you could tell they just haven't done that, and triggers are good for us. Like, we should look at them as, "Hey, this is just an indicator showing me, a little place that I still have some healing to do," and don't be mad at yourself, and just notice it and start to kind of, analyze, like, "Hmm,
Well, it's constant,
what's
right? You
the
go, "Okay."
root cause of this? Why am I so upset about this?" Because it's never about the shower curtain, right? It's never about that.
Well, it's always constant. You always gotta work on yourself. It's like, I feel like I'm always practicing. I'm a Buddhist. I'm practicing Buddhist. I'm a
Mhm.
musician. I'm a software designer. It's like I always have to learn what I don't know. When I
Yes.
have to look at, like, lessons learned, like, in my software business, what I do, we have lessons learned, and we look at, like, what could we done better? What
Mhm.
could we work in this idea called agile, which means that we're gonna work in incremental, fashion to deal with things like we didn't know that yesterday, but we know that today. So now we're
Yeah.
gonna release an update. And if you operate in your life like that, it's like, well, yeah, I can't know everything. You don't beat yourself up. But if you learn a lesson, apply the lesson
Yeah.
and be big enough to say, yeah, what we did wasn't perfect. And so we're releasing a new version because we realized we weren't perfect. Like, and it seems like, well, that's business, but you can apply the same kind of idea to your life.
Well, and it's having a growth mindset. Like, there's a lot of people with fixed mindsets and they think they know it all. And that's like a big red flag, right? You want someone who, my favorite quote is Wayne Dyer said it all the time, but he was actually quoting Talopa. And it's have a mind that is open to everything, but attached to nothing. Very
Mm,
Buddhist, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, so that's a beautiful thing. Like, stay open. Like, we don't know it all. Like, it's so wise to know that basically we're going to still be learning stuff to the day we die. Don't be one of those people who just thinks they got it all figured out. Number one, that's boring. We'll never run out of things to learn. Never.
yeah. We get into these zones, like, And, like, musicians, like, we run into things where people are like, it's a young person's game.
Mhm.
So if you want to, you can age out of the industry because they said, well, you got to be 17 to 25. But
Right,
then yet people break the rule. Like Taylor Swift's beyond that. There's certain people. You have Bob Dylan's beyond that. Neil Young's beyond that. All the blues people are beyond that. Like, you don't have to stop until you're not here. In the
right.
blues and jazz, like, I don't have to stop because I'm not 17. I'm not 25. I'm gonna go till I'm done. And so it's just the idea. Like, I still have something to learn. I saw Herbie Hancock was out there playing, and people that way, his best work was behind him, and then people was like, wow, he did some stuff that's still amazing. He's like, it doesn't matter. It's like, but there's people kind of feel like there's like an ageism, and
Yeah,
or they have like, oh, you got to be in this. This is what's hip. And like, you're not hip anymore. It's like, well, things are expansive in life. The more things you try out, the more you might not be the best at it, but give it a try.
you just said the word expansion. Like we're meant to expand. That's why we're here. We're meant to grow and learn when we stop, I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard this or noticed this, but the stats are showing that when people retire, they die soon after that because they kind of stop living, right? You want to
I
keep,
keep on going.
yeah, even if you're not working, keep doing stuff and expanding your
Go
mind.
find something you want to do. Like, you go to get you dive into the things that you didn't do. But if you keep
Exactly.
on obsessing that, "Oh, I'm not doing what I was doing for the last 30 years," like, you probably won't be here that long because you kinda put yourself in a box. See the
Hmm.
people, it's like, "Oh, I got into art, I got into painting, I got back into my guitar, I got back to my saxophone, I started going doing theater." And
Right.
then suddenly you see they're still out there for a long time because they found something they were passionate about, you know? And it doesn't really matter what your age is, you can always jump into something, you know?
Absolutely. And that's like a lot of people get stuck with those limiting beliefs. And that's something that, is really important to look at. Even no matter what age you are, we're still going to probably have some limiting beliefs, and
Yeah.
just like
Like,
even when we're retired and we're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with myself now? I can't do that because I'm this age. No, you can do whatever you want, like you were saying earlier. And something I want to bring up just so I don't forget, well, two things. One of them's people pleasing.
oh, yeah, I was gonna ask you about.
um yeah, because people pleasing is really common on dates. I definitely am a former people pleaser, and it caused me to get into toxic relationships because it goes back to childhood where I didn't feel wanted. I wanted to feel seen and needed and heard. So that kind of contributes to becoming a people pleaser because you didn't feel loved. So you want to, well, I'm going to make sure they need me, and I'm going to do everything I can to make them love me. And, by being perfect and agreeable and avoiding conflict. And what
Mhm.
that does, you use the word resentment earlier. It leads to like resentment. Like we can sit there and be people pleasers and tell people everything they want to hear, and they're going to like us. Sure, they're going to love that we're doing whatever they want, but we're secretly resentful. We're not even being authentic. Like
Yeah.
that's what I can admit to now is when I was a people pleaser, I was a little liar. I'm
Yeah,
just telling
not
people
authentic.
whatever they wanted to hear. Yeah, and I really didn't want to say yes to whatever this was, whatever they demanded. I didn't want to say yes, but I did because I wanted them to, I didn't want to be abandoned, right? That
Yeah.
abandonment wound. So you end up doing that, and then it's this vicious cycle of doing stuff you don't really want to do, being resentful, and it just causing more toxicity
It gets
within
to,
the
like, a critical
relationship.
mass that, like, "Hey, I got these 100 things I did for you," but
Mhm.
they felt like, "Well, you wanted to do that for me." It's like, "Well, but you really didn't." So they didn't really know what you wanted because you probably didn't tell them what you
And
wanted.
whose fault is that? That's our
Yeah,
fault for not being authentic.
and then they have that crucible, you got that, like, blow up moment where suddenly, like, the 100 things you didn't wanna do. You say, "Well, I did all this for you." It's like, "Well, you said I thought you wanted to do that."
Yeah.
You know?
Do you wanna talk about dating apps and things like that, like, that people are
Yeah,
going through in this modern dating world? Something that nobody's gonna like this one either, that they won't like the alcohol thing and they won't like this but it will avoid so much drama and avoid getting into these toxic situations. Don't
definitely.
have sex for the first 8 dates. 8 dates, get to know somebody that like when you're having sex, it's like very common for people to have sex within the first 3 dates. And this
Yeah.
and then they're having sex with strangers. This is literally a stranger, and you've probably been drinking for all 3 dates, and you really don't know that person at all. You just created that story, put them in, that you're in that limerence chemical haze kind of phase. And people are having sex with strangers and then wondering why the hell it didn't work out. Well, that's why. Because you never really took the time to get to know that person. And so I say for 8 dates, and guess what? Surprise, surprise, you're not going to have 8 dates with most of these people because you're going to
Yeah.
be sober and you're going to be getting
Yeah,
to know
but they're
them, and
probably
you're
looking they like, all my other dates had sex and you're not, so now I'm gonna move on. But
good.
you need to
Bye. Yeah.
start to find the people who are value you as a person rather than you as a way to satisfy their own thing, right? So,
Yeah, so this is
yeah,
probably more for the ladies, right? Because I don't know how many guys are, but like there's men who also are looking for that commitment and that intimacy, but ladies mainly, so usually guys are the gas and
mhm,
women are the brakes. Somebody's got to be the brakes, right?
yeah.
So we really have to be the brakes and just like make sure that we're getting to know each other. And if that person does not want to spend time with you and get to know you for 8, oh well, if you're not going to have sex with me, if I gotta wait, don't tell them, by the way, don't tell them, oh, I'm gonna wait 8 dates. That's
No, no,
weird.
no, it's that you
No.
just do you don't have to say it, you just do it.
Yeah, and make sure you're out doing things with them in all different types of environments, see them in all different types of ways, do fun
Well, just
stuff.
have, like, the dates the way you would think that, not the date that leads right to a sex thing, like a one night stand, like you're going out to a club at Saturday night. But, I think everybody's treating, like, the apps like they're going out to a Saturday night club and they drank too much and they went home with somebody
Just a
they probably
hookup.
shouldn't. Yeah, it's just a hookup, and that's not is it a hookup or you actually looking for something deeper? And I think maybe because the problem with the click systems on these things,
Mhm.
you can just say, "Oh, I can keep on finding new people." It becomes
It's the
addictive
Yes,
because
it's
that
another
becomes the addictive
addiction.
addiction is like, well, if this person doesn't do what I want, I can go to the next one, so I don't have to put up with anything. Well, life is kind of not that you want to put up with stuff that's bad,
Mhm,
but everybody's not going to be that idealized vision in a romance novel or in your
mhm.
you know, this is gonna be the ultimate soulmate on day 1.
And that's why we really
Usually
need to know our values. We need to know that, like that acronym I went through, some of us haven't even taken that time to think, okay, what lifestyle is a good match for mine? Am I open? What are my values? What are my expectations for the future? Some of us haven't even taken that time to know ourselves, right? We got to know ourselves. And we're trying to date people without even really defining what is really important to us. What are our values?
yeah, because I mean, though, I don't know, though, back when I found my wife, it's like I wasn't really well, they didn't have apps, I'm a child of the '70s, but,
Right. Me
I
too.
was we were just, I'm an artist, she's an artist. She was a playwright at Mount Holyoke, and she was looking for somebody to do the music for her play. So we
Yeah.
started to hang out and work on that, and we worked on that for months. And if initially I said, "Well, this is just like a working arrangement with this lady I found attractive," but I didn't really push it that it was gonna
Mhm.
be like a date. But we were just working on something. We got to know each other, started going out to dinner. It just kind of evolved in a really kind of natural way, without
Nice.
it wasn't trying to be a date. And so I think sometimes when people are trying to do the thing is like, sometimes you gotta let life be what it is. Like,
Yeah.
in the middle of doing the thing you love to do, like, you go out to a poetry slam and you're reading poetry, and then you find another poet, you start talking. If you find people where the things you like to do,
Absolutely, that's what I tell
that's
people
work.
all the time. Like, even if it's get out and do some volunteer work.
Yeah,
You don't
stuff
have
like
to
that.
use dating apps. Get out and do things that there's, these meetup groups where, like, let's say you love hiking,
Yeah, mountain
get in a
biking.
hiking, yeah, and, you'll meet some people there, or maybe you won't meet her there, but you'll meet someone who is like, "Hey, I
Know
know the
somebody
perfect
else.
girl for you." Yeah,
Yeah, you this being
networking.
involved in social activity, I was a mountain biker, we started hanging out with a lot of the other women these women that wanted to bike, and we're going for months before
Mhm,
anybody even dated anybody in the group.
right.
Everybody was just into just riding the trails and see how difficult a trail can we do without falling off the bike.
Mm.
So it's just like, and then we go hang out after. But they're like hanging out after you go do something like that, you were bonding by doing the
Yep.
activity, right? By doing the hiking, doing the biking, go doing canoeing. Because I live in New Hampshire, there's a lot of opportunities to actually meet people in kind of healthy situations.
Mhm.
Okay, you can find out when you're walking in the woods what somebody's really about because you start having deep conversations where people are talking for
Yeah.
extended period because you're on a 5 mile walk or
You're
you're on
building
a
a foundation is what you're
yeah,
describing. You're building a foundation, and that's what people aren't doing in the modern dating world on dating apps. You're right. It's this looking at people like it's a freaking catalog. Swipe,
but too
swipe, swipe.
specific. Like you're on the specific date. You're trying to make that the date. You're like, why
Mhm.
don't you let life be and see what happens if you interact with people in real life?
Yeah. What about real life? You're right. And another thing I think is what people get this like I want this they have this ideal person in their head. Like they've got to look this way, be this height and be fit and go to the gym, but then they don't even do this work on themselves. So like you got to ask yourself, would you date yourself? Would you marry
Yeah,
yourself? Like
yeah.
are you want to become the person that you want to attract in a way, right? Like you can't
Mhm.
expect this perfect person, with,
Don't do any work for yourself. If you don't work on
yeah.
yourself, if you don't get yourself at a point like everybody today, like there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of
Mhm.
anxiety in the world because we got AI, you got robotics, you got replacing people's positions, a lot of stress in the workplace. I mean, it's like, well, what can I do? Well, what you can do is take some courses. Like what you
Yeah.
can do instead of saying blaming AI, which it is difficult. I'm in IT and it is taking a lot of things away. But I've gone and taken courses. I'm going and learning technology. In my business and software, we have to reinvent ourselves all the time. You
Yeah,
know,
it's always
started
changing.
started with mainframe. Well, if I just said, well, I only could do mainframe, like where would I be? Because the mainframe
Mhm.
stuff is going away. It's been going away. And some is not even here. But, like, you have to kinda be on the trend, and
You
some
gotta
people
evolve with it.
they get involved 'cause some people wanna just stay point in time, like, "I wanna be where I was when I was 22." Well, you're 40. Do you really does that really seem appropriate to be where you were when you're 22, when you're 40? You know?
Right. Right. It's just
Mhm.
that's that self-awareness thing is like, okay, well, I want all this and I expect all this, but look at yourself too. Like, are you personally are you doing some personal development work and you want this perfect person, but you're not even going to be on their radar, honestly. If you they're not even going to see you. And I think there's a lot of delusional people right now where they think that they deserve this, like they want Barbie, but they're not Ken, or
Yeah,
They
yeah,
want Ken, but they're not Barbie. Like,
yeah,
wait a minute.
yeah,
Let's get
I wanna
realistic.
find the Elon Musk, to be my like, well, there's only so many billionaires. So
Yeah.
are you really gonna find that billionaire? Probably not. It's like, maybe you need to have a different value system.
Or even the height thing. Women really need to get over that for sure, because
Oh, yeah, I tried to
that's
dark, tall,
ridiculous.
and
Like, yeah,
handsome.
right. Like, because you're overlooking some fantastic men with amazing values and and emotionally mature just because they're a couple inches shorter than what you demand. Like that's pretty shallow
Or
and
if
like
you get along with it, it's like if the when they're not the friend zone kinda thing, but like, sometimes people will have, like, that guy friend,
yeah.
and then they always go for the toxic guy, and then their guy friends is like, why do you keep on going after guys like that? You're just crying all the time with me." And I was kind of one of those guys that would be a
The
friend.
shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they would come like my female friend would tell me they're going out with this guy that's like total jerk. And I said, "Well, that's the 3rd jerk you've gone out with this year." And I'm but they're talking to me. And I'm like, "Well, I guess they never even thought to even think about me." I was like, "That's fine," because I went to a different direction. I realized, but it's like they just didn't see that
Because because of they were
having a friendship.
unhealed. They
Yeah,
weren't healed, so they couldn't even see you on their radar because they're only attracted to men who are rejecting them, men who are emotionally unavailable and emotionally immature. So they couldn't even see you because that you weren't on their radar, and maybe they were on yours, but they couldn't see you because they had too much inner
yeah,
work to do still, and it was nothing to do with you. It's like it's there's some women who have had these, horrible relationships, with their family, with their father usually, and they almost are not excited to be with a man unless they have some sort of rejection, right?
Yeah,
Like they
that's
get,
drama.
yeah, rejection and like that keeps them excited and keeps them on their toes. But that's the unhealed woman.
Yeah.
So a lot this is really important what I'm about to say. A lot of men are like, women don't want the nice guy, kind of like what you're saying. They actually, a healed woman does want a nice guy, but I will tell you what we don't want. We don't want a doormat, because that's the people pleaser guy. Guys can be people pleasers just
Oh
as
yeah. Yeah.
easily. So we don't want that guy who just agrees with everything we say, because you could be a nice guy and give us your opinion and be authentic and stand up for, like, hey, stand up for yourself. Like, don't let a woman treat you like a doormat, right? And
No.
a lot of guys do, and that's not very, I'm going to use the word masculine.
No.
There's
Yeah.
I am, because it's not masculine when you let a woman dominate you and treat you that way. We want a guy who can stand up for himself. You're still nice. You're still nice, by speaking your mind. We don't want someone who's going to be arrogant, but we do want this confidence. You see, the confidence is very different than arrogance. So we do like nice guys. We just don't want a doormat people pleaser guy, because we see right through it. We could tell you're not speaking up for yourself, and a woman who is not healed, once again, she's going to take advantage of that. She's going to
Mm.
start to manipulate you, and and have you doing all sorts of things for her just because she can. Honestly, just because she can. But that's not the healthy woman. It's not going to be that way. So if you really feel that way, like all women only want toxic men, and you keep attracting that into your life, it's time to ask yourself, why am I attracting these women who only want the toxic guy? Like, why are you even spending your time with them? Maybe you need to look at what you're attracted to. Maybe you're attracted to emotionally unavailable women. Like, why are
Yeah.
why does it keep showing up in
Well, it
your
could be
life?
that you could be kind of shallow yourself and you're only going for somebody that's
Looks.
not emotionally available
Yeah,
and
you
you're
might you
going
might
just
have
for
a
the
certain
emotion.
type, a certain way they look, and then you're ignoring these very obvious red flags of their
Yeah.
character. Men, you need to look for character first, and then looks.
Well, I think,
Character
yeah, I think that's the people are kind of primed to go for, the tall,
visual.
dark, and handsome and the beautiful, right?
Mhm.
Without looking at beauty can be in multiple levels, but we tend to go for the surface level rather than the deep level. Like if you do what we were talking about, like if I'm on a mountain bike trip or a hiking trip or I'm at a coffee shop doing poetry and I see another person, I hear them read their poem.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this poem is unbelievable. So I'm actually getting a window into their soul because they showed it to me because they're vulnerable as
Yes.
a poet. And then when you sat down and say, hey, that poem was awesome. You start talking to them, and you're actually not just trying to do a come on. You actually liked their poem. You liked what they wrote. You
Mhm.
actually felt something. Then you can have a real conversation because you actually saw something. It wasn't just what they were wearing or what they looked like. It's what they were doing and what they
Right.
said and how they said it. And that I don't know if enough people that's their first impression is the work that was something that came out of them that wasn't just their physical attribute. Is
Yeah,
their
and that's how bonding and connection, like, and actually connection's the opposite of addiction, by the way. When you have those true authentic connections, you don't have these voids that you're trying to fill all the time with substances and empty relationships, So really connection, finding these real bonds, like that you gave the perfect advice is going out and doing stuff that you love, and then you're going to naturally meet up and have this, you know, real connections, not the online swiping, let's
yeah.
go out and hook up, and you're hot too, okay. And then like 3 days later, uh yeah, that was a mistake, that didn't work out, and now you had sex with the person, and it's meaningless, right? So I mean, some people, that's what they're looking for, is just a casual thing, and I'm not
Well, that
talking to
is
those people.
yeah, if you're looking for people who are actually looking for a deeper connection
Yeah.
and, and maybe they thought they were looking for a deeper connection, but they keep on scrolling and doom scrolling and just going through it all. It's like, well, that's not really looking for you. Like, look at what you're in the mirror. What are you doing? You
Yeah.
said you're doing this, but you're doing that. Your action doesn't match up with what you say you want,
When
right?
people show you who they are, believe them because they are showing you. So that's what we said earlier, your actions, not words, right? And just really, really paying attention and to things that we probably we've been leading with other superficial things, and I think that if we want to stay out of these toxic relationships, do all of these things, like really spend time writing down what is important to you, make a list. And I mean, I have a manifestation list. I love manifestation lists. And what you're gonna notice is you're gonna end up tweaking it later because I've gotten everything I wanted on my manifestation list, everything. And it ended up being like, ooh, I didn't want some of this stuff after all. Then you tweak it and that's okay, like, and you
Yeah.
make some changes
Well, you
because
just have to kind of tell the universe what you want, but a lot of people are kind of scared to it's like when you actually can self-actualize,
yeah.
being a Buddhist is like when we chant, we focus on what we want,
Hmm.
right?
And we
And you
get what we
focus,
focus on. We get what we
yeah,
focus on.
yeah,
Yeah.
you focus on I want peace, I want I want to be able to be successful. I don't say, well, today's gonna be a bad day. So I'm gonna chant all day that today's gonna be a bad day. Because, if today I feel sad, it's like, well, that's not what I'm gonna chant about. That's not
Right.
but if that's where you start your day, then you might end up in the place that you're kind of manifesting that law of attraction in a bad way
Well,
instead
yeah.
of having that positivity. And then some people say, "Oh, it's corny to be positive all the time," or they think it's hokey to be able to it's foo-foo to do that. It's like, no, because it's like if you can get yourself and if you can reprogram your mind and your spirit and your mindset, you'll have a lot more success.
Yeah, and like with my manifestation list that I got things I want, and then I sometimes we don't know what we want until we have it, right? So that's how you learned. And so then that's why it's okay to tweak what you manifest because it's like, okay, well, I thought I wanted this type of guy, but it turned out that that came along with this and I didn't really want that. So we can tweak things, you
Mhm.
know. But I'm not a positive vibes only person. I think it's important like to acknowledge all feelings that we're
Mhm.
having and not suppress them because when we suppress them that can cause disease,
Yeah.
disease and sickness. So we want to go ahead and acknowledge those feelings, but just remember you aren't your feelings. You're the witness of your feelings. I'm sure you know this from your being Buddhist. So just observe it, but don't dwell in it. But go ahead and feel your feelings because if we are like positive
Yeah,
vibes
yeah.
only, that's toxic
Yeah.
because we it's okay to we're humans and our feelings are actually indicators of where we need to go next. So like
Well,
it's like
yeah, to get back to balance, like, you're always gonna be
mhm,
struggling for balance,
mhm.
and you're gonna have like, I'm an artist, so I know I go through melancholy, go through frenetic
Yeah,
stuff,
and that's
and
okay.
so it's all part of the balance, but, you don't wanna be on one side of it, and it's a struggle to stay in balance. It's like until you're not here, you're always gonna be working to try to balance the scale, and
Yeah.
some days you're gonna feel like you're in a storm, and like if you're a captain that's never gone through a storm, I probably don't want to be on that boat. You know,
And every day we have a fresh start with our vibe, right? Like we every morning we have a clean slate because our vibration resets overnight. And as long as we don't wake up and start thinking the same old thoughts, the same crap, when a lot of us do, a lot of us are on autopilot. So it's really important to just remember that in the morning, catch yourself. Don't get into your subconscious. Don't let all that same old stuff come back up. We got to start being mindful and bring all that subconscious stuff into our conscious mind where we can change it and heal it. And instead of being Mr. Autopilot, having the same thoughts as the day before, and then most of those thoughts are negative, and then we wonder why our life never changes, right? Well, we gotta go out of our way to be more conscious and mindful about what we're thinking.
yeah. I mean, it's cathartic as an artist. If I felt melancholy, I'll turn it into a song, and then that becomes the positive action of creating that art. Kind of gets that out of my soul,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Because we
beautiful.
actually drove into it, and then I wrote piano chords or something. I wrote something to describe that feeling instead of obsessing about the feeling.
Yeah,
I took the feeling and I turned it into a piece of work, which a lot of artists, that's what we is like art
that's what
therapy.
you do. Yes, I
That's
love it.
how we process it. But people who don't have art, they have to find another way to do it. If you've never used like art therapy to process through pain or situations, even like you're happy. I mean, I could be real happy, write a funky song, and
Hmm.
it's got a funky beat and it's like very upbeat because like that's what I'm feeling like. I'm feeling real positive or aspirational, like a Stevie Wonder type of thing. It's like I'm going to write this really aspirational thing.
Hmm.
And so you can, or Bob Marley, I'm going to write this thing that's like very aspirational. So it can go either way. It doesn't always have to be sad. It doesn't
Right.
always have to be mad, like punk rock. It could be something that's like all over the spectrum. But like as long as you're finding a way to process it, it still gives like the value of you like looking in the mirror in your
Hmm.
soul and then realizing what. So if you can use something that you like to do, cooking, knitting, walking outside, going into the woods, taking your feet,
Yeah.
shoes off and putting your feet on the grass.
Grounding yourself.
Yeah,
Yes.
something to get you out of your zone of like discomfort.
Yeah, that's so important. And yeah, I've got this addiction recovery with the law of attraction cards that I created, which has all of those like techniques and all the law of attraction. Like there's so many misconceptions, and it's 44 cards, and some of the cards in there. So someone would pick one every day and follow the
Hmm,
directions, and like so I've got grounding as one of them, and find your passion. But each card has like all these instructions on the back of them. So
cool.
it's all the things that helped me, like meditation's one of them. And so you're
Hmm,
always going to pick the card that you're meant to pick for the day because that's how law of attraction works. And 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 it's like, sun gazing is really important too. A lot of us don't get enough vitamin D, and
Yeah,
we
I
need to
go
do
for a
stuff
walk
like
in the
that. Yeah.
woods. Yeah, that's what I
Being in nature is huge. Like I feel like that, like to me there's nothing more spiritual than being out in
well, it's
nature.
very restorative. It's kind of like I was talking to somebody yesterday on a podcast, and I was pointing out like um, Wordsworth talked about the idea that nature is the cathedral, and
Yes.
it's in his poem. And I think Longfellow also used it in his poems. They was very restorative to go walk out in the woods, to go walk out in the sun, to be in nature, to go to the ocean, to go to that pond. That you feel this restorative power by being close to the earth. And if you get disconnected from the earth, then you get less and less connected, and you get depressed. And so
Right,
this
so
idea,
take
if
off
you
your
get more,
shoes, you be barefoot, you gotta be barefoot, we're electromagnetic beings, and so we need that connection to the earth, and most of us aren't getting it, and I think, a lot of people, would be less sick if we spent more time doing that. We really just even if it's just 15 minutes a day, we don't it doesn't have to be
yeah, but
just
we get
taking
so
that
tied
time.
to our, kind of structural modern world, and it's like, oh, I go from the car to the plane to the office, back to the car to the plane and home.
And
Like,
distractions, our phones, like distractions, we're always just scrolling
yeah,
and doing we have time in our day to do this. We just trick ourselves and lie to ourselves into thinking that we don't. But we
yeah,
all spend, including myself, sometimes I literally have to go put my phone in another room
yeah,
because I like get stuck in the scrolling cycle. Like, and I'm like, what am I doing? I gotta like my neck hurts, my hand hurts from holding like I'm like, what am I doing? Just catching yourself interrupting these patterns,
yeah.
in everything. That's really the key is just self-awareness.
Well, I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. We always end up hitting the hour mark faster than we ever expect to, but we do have your link tree, day one life coaching. That'll be fully clickable. We do encourage people to click that. If people click on your link tree, I would imagine that's how they can connect with you. Maybe you can tell people what's there.
Yeah. So, what I should do is offer your listeners. I have those addiction recovery cards. I'll offer $10 off and what I should use coupon code. I can use Ghost. Want me to use Ghost for the coupon
Yeah,
code?
yeah, yeah. You can do
So
that.
so anyone listening, as soon as we're off of this, I'll put coupon code GHOST in for $10 off of those cards. And you'll see that in my link tree. I also always offer a free discovery call with me, and you'll see that on my website, day1lifecoaching.com. And what a discovery call is just like you might be like, maybe I need a life coach. And I'm not sure though. So we have a discussion. You tell me a little about your background and what your goals are, what you're looking for. If you're feeling stuck in life, that's a good reason to have one of these discovery calls. And we decide together if coaching's right for you or not. And so that's free. And that's with a Zoom with me.
Oh,
And yeah, so that's just something that you could sign up with totally free. You just do that, sign up on my website.
Coupon code Ghost. Like a lot of my fans are familiar with that coupon code, so that's a good idea. So
Yeah.
thank you again for being a guest on a Family Electric Ghost show. We do appreciate that you've been here. We've been live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We'll be on. You can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. And again, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.